There you have it. Gerald Celente noting, America now lives in, as Mussolini would describe it, in the merger of corporate and state power. It is fascism. We're now into the final half hour of this episode 191, and it's the lightning round. We've reached the 1021 News Purge. Don't waste your time just looking back, which we take from our opening track from Keen and Kanane. We'll take BioWars EnviroHealth for 100. You ready? U.S. slips to 49th in life expectancy, studies show. More on that from rawstory.com. Half of U.S. teens meet criteria for mental disorder, again from Raw Story. And from USWGO.com, confirmed. The new psychiatric manual, the DSM-4-TR, labels freethinkers, nonconformers as mentally ill. You can grab the PDF for yourself from Scribd. Going right along with that, from bnet.com, how CNN and I add in CFRs, Sanjay Gupta became Big Pharma's favorite face. Could it be because drug companies pay 17,000 U.S. doctors? Report finds. More on that from Reuters. Scientific American writing that we need to kill more babies to save Earth. Paul Joseph Watson breaking that down. Interestingly enough, a 20-year-old embryo has now become a baby boy. Meanwhile, Polish bishops call in vitro fertilization the younger sister of eugenics. Look who's talking. Alleged leader of cult works as a psychologist. More on that from The Age out of Australia. Israel building underground facility in case of bioterror. More on that from bioprepwatch.com. Americans show concern about taking flu vaccine. That's from vaccinenewsdaily.com, and that had some military outlets visiting MediaMonarchy.com. Food freedom covering the UN to vote on chemtrails, but of course, if you want to use their terminology, it's geoengineering. And our last BioWars EnviroHealth note is the first episode of the second season of Jesse Ventura's Conspiracy Theory. This one is on the dastardly location known as Plum Island. Longtime listeners of the show will know that we've broken down this story in the past. Lab 257, its connections to Nazis and Lyme disease and more. You always have to ask yourself when these things break out, who could have made it? Where on earth could this have come from? The labs. But on to the drug war as we approach the vote. Pot the vote. Hashtag pot the vote. U.S. will enforce marijuana laws despite California vote. Again from Raw Story, Eric Holder talking out of both sides of his mouth. At first, when the Obama-Messiah Change-Alleluia administration came in, they were saying we're not going to prosecute things like this anymore. But of course, it still goes on. Here's even the Los Angeles sheriff saying pot legalization not going to pass, even if it passes. More on that from newsjunkiepost.com. Meanwhile, Jocelyn Elders, the woman who lost her job by mentioning masturbation back in the early days of the Clinton regime, now, of course, noting that we should legalize marijuana, and of course, she's right on both points, but the talking heads and corporate-controlled media don't like it when people come out and speak the truth, and then you have to lose your job. The last drug war note, CVS fined $77 million for selling meth ingredients to criminals. And I suppose those millions give us our other econo-crash-related headlines. U.S. leaders destroying the dollar. That's from Press TV out of Iran. U.S. owes apparently $1.2 billion in their United Nations dues. Oh no, are they going to kick us out? More on that from Reuters. But here's at least a sheriff standing up. Actually, what was it? Protect and serve, that's right. Chicago sheriff says no to enforcing foreclosures. More on that from CNBC. BusinessInsider.com gives us the Bank of America report that everyone was talking about. Of course, tying to MERS and ForeclosureGate. But if we take it from money.cnn.com, and if you'll recall last week's episode, I believe, of NewWorldNextWeek.com, we noted how the military embeds PSYOPs soldiers within news outlets. They did it to CNN money, but here they are reporting on 85% of college graduates move back home.
Personally, I learned from the recession that I'm very lucky because I think a lot of people don't have jobs, and I don't think that the government does enough for people who are hurting them.
I pretty much lost my job, I could tell you that much. And I had no money to eat, so I had to just go home, like straight home and eat house food.
I mean, it's always hard being a college student. You have to work on a tight budget and get a job.
You really have to be careful with your money nowadays. Even the savings that you had, they could be gone, the next day.
Well, it's hard to get an apartment, or sometimes easier, depending on where you are.
I'm in graduate school, so a lot of people go back to graduate school since the labor market is not doing so well. So it made admissions more difficult to get in.
Kind of looking at college now with a sense of trepidation, how are we going to pay for it?
I'm working for Columbia right now, and that's helping, and just hopefully your parents help you out a little bit, and you can pay them back later,
Mommy and Daddy are not as reliable as they once were.
It made getting government funds extremely difficult. In fact, I'm actually still waiting for the funds to get submitted by Department of Education.
There's been recessions throughout all of United States history. Roll with the punches. We'll figure it out and get out of it hopefully soon.
That's wishful thinking, my man. You got to get to the root and not bat around the branches. We've got to strike at the root, and we don't have time to go into all of the money truth right here. Our last note on Econocrash updates is a great rant on the banksters from Dylan Radigan, who is another of corporate-controlled media who seems to come out of nowhere and really speak to folks, whether they're just being used as that release valve to let people feel like, yeah, they get it. That guy on that corporate-controlled outlet is really speaking for me. That doesn't take away from the truth that he speaks. But again, we want to get at the underlying, the text and the subtext and the context. Let's move on to geopolitics, where Angela Merkel says Germany's multicultural society has failed. That's from the AFP, and Merkel says that basically everybody needs to assimilate and become Christian, and we're not going to tolerate any of you crazy brown people who believe in your crazy made-up God. You need to believe in our crazy made-up God. Militants stage deadly raid on the Chechen parliament. More on that from, again, the AFP. And a scary story, if only because it seems to have a precluded outcome from the upshot. 20-year-old female college student named police chief in violence-plagued Mexican town after nobody else would apply. That, unfortunately, sounds like a TV movie waiting to happen. As, unfortunately, it ties into what we already referred to, the border wars, the immigration, the drug war, North American Union, all of those things. Racing down the history mystery list through our news purge with an interesting one, again, from the upshot. Ex-Secret Service officer almost accidentally shot LBJ the night after JFK's assassination. Retired Secret Service agent Gerald Blaine, B-L-A-I-N-E, has a book coming out, The Kennedy Detail, that contains a rather stunning revelation. In the chaotic wake of the power transfer that took place after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Blaine says he almost shot Lyndon Johnson when he mistook him for an intruder inside Johnson's D.C. home. Instinctively, Blaine picked up the Thompson submachine gun and activated the bolt on the top. Now, while that is an interesting tidbit, it's far more interesting to look at that second photo taken in Air Force One after the main photo everybody knows where LBJ's swearing in, and you can see Jack Valenti crouched down in the background. The next photo where he turns around and winks to his bankster gangster friends. Far more interesting, of course, too, would be the story of the Secret Service agents who were called off of JFK's motorcade. Google that. But our other history mystery notes, time capsule from 1887 found in Ireland. More on that from irishtimes.com. And our last history mystery note is something, again, these stories from the past come blaring out. And fortunately, this gives the all-around story that, again, the past comes back to bite us in the ass. Anita Hill responds to Clarence Thomas's wife, saying she has no intention of apologizing.
But we are going to begin today with that out-of-the-blue voicemail left for Anita Hill. The wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas asked her to apologize for saying Thomas sexually harassed her all those years ago. Jake Tapper broke the story, and he has more from Washington. Jake?
Good morning, George. Well, the story was first actually reported by Mark Matthews of ABC's San Francisco station, KGO. Initially, Anita Hill thought the call was a prank, and she reported it to campus police, but it was no prank.
To tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Since those contentious Supreme Court confirmation hearings back in 1991,
my name is Anita F. Hill.
Anita Hill has become a professor, now at Brandeis University. But a few days ago, she got a surprising voicemail message. She let ABC News hear it. Good morning, Anita Hill. It's Ginny Thomas, the message said. I would love you to consider an apology sometime and some full explanation of why you did what you did with my husband. So give it some thought and certainly pray about this and come to understand why you did what you did. For some, that almost 20-year-old saga may be difficult to remember, but the charges were explosive. In 1991, Hill accused now Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas of sexual harassment.
Judge Thomas began to use work situations to discuss sex.
From my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching.
When Thomas published his autobiography 3 years ago, he and his wife reflected on those days with Jan Crawford.